Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into Pantech Global's IPO. And this one's pretty interesting. It's not your typical IPO. It's what's called a chain listing, meaning that Pantech Global is already part of a larger publicly traded company. It's kind of like a branch of a tree deciding to become its own tree, but still connected to the original trunk. We're going to be using their IPO prospectus and the application procedures to try to figure out what this all means for potential investors like you.
Yeah, certainly an unusual approach and definitely raises a lot of questions. What's the motivation behind it?
Yeah.
And what are the implications?
Yeah.
Not only for Pantech Global, but also for the parent company, PGHB Group.
Right. So before we get too far into the weeds of what a chain listing is, let's start with the basics. What exactly does Pantech Global do?
Well, they're in the business of pipes, but we're not talking to the kind you'd find under your kitchen sink. They manufacture what are called butt weld pipe fittings and stainless steel welded pipes. Think heavy-duty connectors and pipes, the kind that are used in industries like oil and gas, chemicals, utilities.
Okay, so essential, but not very glamorous. But here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. They're not just some local player. They're actually operating in 27 foreign markets.
Wow, yeah, that's a pretty big deal. That definitely suggests that they've carved out a significant position for themselves in the global market. Now, going back to this chain listing idea, the prospectus actually gives us some clues as to why they might have chosen this route. It seems that they're aiming for a more defined focus. By separating Pantech Global and PGHB Group, can each target specific investors and really hone their branding.
Okay, so it's like each company gets to kind of shine in its own spotlight. But what does that actually mean for their growth plans? What are they hoping to achieve with this IPO?
Well, they're not just sitting on their pipes, that's for sure. The prospectus outlines some pretty ambitious plans. They're building a new warehouse in Johor, Malaysia, and that kind of signals to me that they're anticipating a surge in demand. They're also setting up a new pickling facility. Now, for those who might not know, pickling is a chemical treatment that cleans and prepares metal surfaces for manufacturing.
Sounds like they're gearing up for some serious production.
Yeah, and there's more. They're also planning to establish a brand new corporate head office and a factory in Klang, Malaysia. They're really going all in on this expansion.
Okay, so we've got this intriguing chain listing strategy and some really ambitious growth plans. But every savvy investor knows there's always two sides to every coin. What are some of the risks and challenges that Pantech Global might face?
Yeah, that's where things get a little bit less exciting, but equally important. The prospectus, as always, lays out the risk factors, and one that immediately jumps out is their dependence on the U.S. market. Almost half of their revenue comes from the U.S.
Oh, so any hiccups in the U.S. economy could have a big impact on them all the way over in Malaysia. Not ideal.
Exactly. And then there's also the reliance on certain major customers. They specifically mention a customer A1, who contributes a significant chunk of their revenue. Losing a client like that could be a real blow.
Yikes. Anything else we should be wary of?
One more thing. They're also vulnerable to changes in foreign worker policies in Malaysia. A large portion of their workforce is made up of foreign workers, particularly in the production department. So any shifts in visa regulations or labor laws could really disrupt their operations.
So some potential bumps in the road definitely makes you think carefully about those growth plans.
It certainly highlights the importance of doing your due diligence. Now, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of their financials, was there anything in their performance that stood out to you?
Well, they did mention this dividend payout ratio in the prospectus. It's been pretty high in recent years, which could be attractive to some investors. But I gotta admit, seeing it at over 100% in 2024 definitely raised an eyebrow. Is that even sustainable?
That's a great question. And it's one we should definitely explore further. A high payout ratio can be tempting, but it also raises questions about whether they're prioritizing rewarding investors over reinvesting in the company's future. It's a delicate balance.
A balance we will definitely need to unpack. And speaking of unpacking, how about we delve into the specifics of those financials and see what kind of story the numbers tell? We'll be back after a quick break to do just that.
All right, we're back and ready to tackle those numbers. Let's dig into Pantech Global's financials and see what we can uncover. You know, that dividend payout ratio you mentioned earlier, that's still on my mind.
Yeah, exceeding 100% in 2024 is definitely unusual. Just to give you some context, their dividend payout ratio was a modest 18.23% in 2022. Then it jumped to 32.31% in 2023, which is still, within a reasonable range. But that sudden leap to 142.42% in 2024, that raises some eyebrows. It's almost like they're spending more than they're earning. And, that can't go on forever.
Yeah, it's like maxing out your credit card to treat your friends to a fancy dinner.
Right.
Great in the moment, but not exactly a sustainable financial strategy. Exactly. The prospectus mentions that they used internal funds to cover those dividends, but it doesn't really explain such a drastic increase. It's possible they had a one-time windfall that year, maybe from selling assets or landing a particularly lucrative contract,
Yeah.
but can they keep that up?
Okay.
Especially considering those ambitious growth plans we talked about.
Right, because those new facilities and expanding their workforce, that won't come cheap. Speaking of which, how are they planning to finance all this growth? We know the IPO is part of the equation, but what about the rest?
Well, the prospectus does break down how they intend to use the IPO proceeds. A big chunk, 12.32 million ringgit, is allocated to constructing that new warehouse in Johor. Another 9 million ringgit is going towards that new pickling facility, and a significant portion, 20.68 million ringgit, is earmarked for the new corporate headquarters and factory in Klang.
So those three projects alone account for a pretty big portion of the IPO funds. What about the rest?
While the remaining 135.31 million ringgit
Mm-hmm.
will be used for working capital, the money they need to keep the business running smoothly day to day, like managing inventory, covering operating expenses. And it is worth noting that they do have a healthy cash balance, 118.19 million ringgit as of August 31st, 2024. So that provides a good starting point.
Okay, so they've got some cash on hand IPO money coming in and a plan for how to use it. But let's not forget about those risk factors we talked about. Their heavy reliance on the U.S. market seems particularly relevant in today's, unpredictable global landscape. What happens if things go south with the U.S. economically or politically?
Well, the prospectus acknowledges that a significant portion of their revenue, 47.44% to be exact,
Mm-hmm.
comes from the U.S. market.
Yep.
That includes sales through distributors in Taiwan, so any economic downturn or trade tensions with the U.S. could directly impact their bottom line.
It's a gamble for sure. And then there's the reliance on those major customers. You mentioned customer A1 earlier. Just how much of their business relies on this one client?
Well, for the fiscal year 2024, customer A1 accounted for a whopping 21% of their total revenue. And this relationship goes way back. They've been working together for 23 years.
Wow, that's a long-standing partnership, but it also highlights the potential downfall if that relationship were to, crumble. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Diversifying their customer base would definitely make them less vulnerable. Now, remember that other risk factor we discussed, their reliance on foreign workers. It's a significant part of their workforce.
Right. Those foreign workers make up a large portion of their production team. Remind us what the potential issues are there.
Well, as of August 31st, 2024, they had 507 foreign workers, which makes up a hefty 65.59% of their total workforce. And most of these workers are in their production department, the heart of their operation. So any changes to work visa policies or labor laws in Malaysia could really throw a wrench in their production capacity.
So they're walking a tightrope, balancing these risks against their potential for growth. But let's talk about what makes Pantech Global stand out. What are their strengths? What are their competitive advantages?
Well, one key strength is their commitment to quality. They've obtained numerous certifications from reputable organizations, showing that they meet industry standards. For example, they hold ISO 901.2015 certification for their manufacturing processes and have approvals for both the global and shipping industries. These certifications give their customers confidence that their products are high quality and reliable.
So it's not just about making pipes. It's about making pipes that meet rigorous standards. What else sets them apart?
Well, their global reach is another advantage. They have customers in 27 foreign markets across diverse regions, Asia Pacific, the Americas, Europe, even the Middle East and North Africa. This wide geographical spread helps reduce their reliance on any single market and shows that they can compete on an international stage.
It's like a safety net spreading the risk. What about their leadership? Do they have a team with the experience to navigate this complex global market?
They do. Their group managing director, Tan Ang Ang, has over 40 years of experience in the industry, and he's backed by a seasoned team with deep technical expertise. They seem well equipped to lead Pantech Global through this next chapter of growth.
So experience, quality, global reach. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around this chain listing concept. Why go through this elaborate process instead of just staying a subsidiary of PGHB Group?
Well, the prospectus suggests that it's about clarity and focus. By separating Pantech Global and PGHB Group, can each appeal to specific investors, refine their branding, and present more transparent financial reports. It allows investors to clearly evaluate the performance of each entity, rather than getting a muddled picture from the larger group.
So it's like decluttering a messy room. Each item has its own place and purpose. But wouldn't the separation also create some operational challenges? I mean, they've been operating as part of PGHB Group for a while now. Won't there be some bumps along the way?
Well, there are always challenges with major restructuring, but the prospectus does outline steps they've taken to ensure a smooth transition. They've established clear agreements with PGHB Group to address potential conflict of interest and make sure that resources are allocated fairly. They've also implemented strong internal controls and governance structures to maintain transparency and accountability.
So they're not just jumping ship without a lifeboat. They've put some safeguards in place. But let's get back to the basics literally. What are these butt weld pipe fittings and stainless steel welded pipes? I'm picturing something like what's under my sink, but I have a feeling it's a bit more complex than that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a far cry from your kitchen sink plumbing.
Yeah.
Let's start with the butt weld pipe fittings. These are essential components used to connect pipes in various industrial applications. Think of them as specialized connectors that create strong leak-proof joints, able to withstand high pressure and temperature.
Okay, so we're talking heavy-duty industrial-grade stuff. What kind of fittings are we talking about?
They manufacture a range of butt weld pipe fittings, including elbows, tees, reducers, and caps. Each one serves a specific purpose in a piping system. They use both carbon steel and stainless steel, depending on the application and how much durability is needed.
And what about the stainless steel welded pipes themselves? What are those used for?
Well, as the name suggests, they're pipes made from stainless steel sheets, formed and welded together. Pantech Global specializes in straight seam welded pipes, which have a single weld running along their length. They act as the conduits through which fluids and gases flow.
So the butt weld pipe fittings are the connectors, and the stainless steel welded pipes are the pipelines. Together, they form the backbone of all sorts of industrial processes. It's amazing to think something as seemingly simple as a pipe fitting is so crucial to industries like oil and gas or chemicals.
It really highlights the importance of precision engineering and manufacturing. These components might seem mundane, but they play a vital role in ensuring the safe and efficient operation of the systems that power our modern world.
Okay, so we've covered the what of their products. Now let's get into the how. Can you walk us through their manufacturing process? I'm curious to know how they actually create these high-precision components.
Sure, their manufacturing process is a multi-step journey that starts with procuring raw materials. For the carbon steel butt weld pipe fittings, they primarily use carbon steel seamless pipes, sourced from various suppliers.
Seamless pipes, so no weak points from welds or seams.
Exactly. Seamless pipes are much stronger and more durable, which is essential for high-pressure applications.
Makes sense. So what happens to these seamless pipes once they arrive at Pantech Global's facilities?
Well, first they cut the seamless pipes into specific lengths based on the type of fitting being made. Then the edges are shaped to precise angles to ensure proper alignment during welding. This is called beveling.
So precision is key right from the start.
Absolutely. Next comes forming. They use different methods like hot forming and cold forming to bend and shape the pipe sections into the configurations needed for each type of fitting.
I'm imagining some pretty heavy-duty machinery is involved in this process.
You're right. They use specialized machines like hydraulic presses and mandrel benders to apply controlled force and heat to mold the pipe sections into the correct shapes.
Sounds impressive. So once the pipe sections are formed, what happens next?
Then comes the crucial step of welding. Skilled welders use advanced techniques to join the formed sections together, creating strong leak-proof joints. These welds have to be absolutely flawless, especially considering the high-pressure environments these fittings will be used in.
I bet those welds are scrutinized pretty carefully.
Oh, absolutely. They conduct rigorous quality control checks, using both destructive and non-destructive testing methods.
Destructive testing. So they actually break some of the fittings to see how they hold up.
Well, not quite breaking them, but they do perform tests that damage the fitting to analyze its strength and the weld's quality. These tests give them valuable data about the material's properties and how effective their welding techniques are.
And what about the non-destructive tests? What are those like?
Well, non-destructive tests don't damage the fitting. They use techniques like ultrasonic testing and magnetic particle inspection to detect any hidden flaws or imperfections in the welds. They're leaving no stone unturned to ensure quality.
It sounds like a very thorough process. So what's the final step?
Once a fitting passes all the inspections, it undergoes a final finishing process. This might involve machining, grinding, or surface treatment, depending on the specific requirements of the customer.
So it's a complex multi-step process with a lot of attention to detail and quality control. No wonder they've built a solid reputation in the industry.
Exactly. Now let's move on to their stainless steel welded pipes. The process starts with stainless steel coils, sourced from suppliers who get their stainless steel from a mill in Indonesia.
Sourcing the materials close to home? Smart move, cuts down on transportation costs. So how do they turn these coils into pipes?
They use a process called roll forming. The flat stainless steel sheet is gradually shaped into a cylindrical tube. By passing it through a series of rollers, you can picture it like dough going through a pasta maker, gradually taking on the desired shape.
I can visualize that. What happens after the sheet is shaped into a tube?
Well, the edges of the tube are carefully aligned and welded together again using advanced techniques. And just like with the butt weld pipe fittings, these welds undergo rigorous quality control, including both destructive and non-destructive testing.
So consistency and quality control is a top priority across their product line. What happens after the welding is complete?
The pipe goes through several finishing processes, which might include cutting, deburring, pickling, and surface treatments. The specific finishing steps depend on the customer's specifications.
You mentioned pickling earlier when talking about the fittings. Is it the same process for the pipes?
It is. Pickling uses a chemical treatment to remove any imperfections or discoloration from the surface of the stainless steel. This ensures a smooth, clean finish.
So they've got these two core products, each manufactured through a complex and meticulous process. It seems like they've really nailed down the art of precision engineering.
Absolutely. Their dedication to quality and their ability to meet diverse customer needs is what has allowed them to carve out a niche in this global pipes and fittings market.
Okay, so we've explored their financials, their growth plans, their risk factors, their rationale for this chain listing, and even delved into their manufacturing processes. We've covered a lot of ground. But before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your overall assessment of Pantech Global as an investment opportunity. What are your key takeaways?
That's a great question. Pantech Global presents an interesting and potentially lucrative investment opportunity. They're operating in a growing industry, they have a history of solid financial performance, and they're pursuing ambitious growth plans that could make them even more competitive.
Sounds promising. But you mentioned potentially lucrative, which suggests there's a flip side to consider.
Right. Like with any investment, there are risks involved. Their dependence on the U.S. market, their reliance on a few major customers, and their vulnerability to changes in foreign worker policies in Malaysia are all factors investors need to weigh carefully.
So a mixed bag, as with most investments. Due diligence is key. We've given our listeners a lot to think about. What are some key questions they should be asking themselves as they dig deeper into Pantech Global's story?
Here are a few things to ponder. What are the underlying trends driving the growth of the global pipes and fittings market? How might factors like infrastructure development, energy demand, and technological advancements shape the industry's future?
Those are great points. And tying back to our previous discussion, how might geopolitical shifts or protectionist policies impact global trade and consequently Pantech Global's business? Could they adapt and mitigate those risks?
Important questions indeed. And of course, we can't forget about that elephant in the room, that 142.42% dividend payout ratio in 2024. Was it a one-off event or a sign of things to come? Can they maintain such generous payouts while also funding their ambitious growth plans? These are all things worth considering.
Lots to think about, but we've equipped our listeners with the knowledge and insights to start forming their own opinions.
We've given them a solid foundation. Now it's up to each individual to decide if Pantech Global's chain listing is an investment opportunity they want to pursue. And remember, we've only scratched the surface. The prospectus and application procedures we've explored contain a wealth of information. Don't be afraid to dig deeper and do your own research.
Absolutely. We've guided you through the complexities, but the ultimate decision rests with you, the listener. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to go back to something that's been bugging me.
Oh, what's that?
It's that dividend payout ratio again, that 142.42% in 2024. It's such an outlier compared to previous years. Do you have any theories about what might have caused such a jump?
It's certainly peculiar. While the prospectus states they used internal funds to cover those dividends, it doesn't offer a specific explanation for such a drastic increase.
It's like a missing piece of the puzzle.
Perhaps. It's possible they had a one-time windfall that year, maybe from the sale of assets or an exceptionally profitable contract. Or maybe they strategically increased the payout to boost investor confidence before this chain listing.
Those are some interesting possibilities. I guess we'll have to delve a little deeper into their financial statements to see if we can unearth any clues.
Indeed. And that's something I always encourage listeners to do. Don't just take our word for it. Explore the source material, analyze the data, and form your own informed opinions. We're here to guide you, but ultimately the investment decisions are yours to make.
Well said. We've taken a deep dive into Pantech Global and their unique chain listing. But the exploration doesn't end here. There's always more to uncover. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Pantech Global. From their unusual chain listing strategy to their ambitious growth plans, we've really explored, the key aspects of this potential investment opportunity.
Yeah, we've uncovered some important questions too that I think warrant further consideration. Remember, investing is like putting together a puzzle. We've given you some of the pieces, but it's up to you to see if they fit into your overall investment picture.
Exactly. And, we've talked about the potential rewards, but let's not forget about those risk factors. Their reliance on the U.S. market, for example. That's something to keep a close eye on.
Absolutely. Any investor needs to consider how global events and economic trends could impact Pantech Global's business. What if trade tensions escalate or protectionist policies take hold? How would that affect their bottom line?
Yeah, it makes you think about the bigger picture, doesn't it? It's not just about the numbers on a balance sheet. It's about understanding the global forces that can shape a company's destiny.
And speaking of numbers, we can't ignore that elephant in the room. That 142.42% dividend payout ratio in 2024, was it a one-time blip or a sign of a potentially unsustainable financial strategy? Can they keep handing out such generous dividends while also funding their expansion plans?
It's a question worth pondering for sure. You know how they allocate capital, the balance between rewarding investors with dividends, reinvesting in the company's growth, and managing debt. That will play a crucial role in their long-term success.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to those broader questions about the industry. What's driving the growth of the global pipes and fittings market? How might infrastructure development, energy demand, and technological advancements shape the industry's trajectory in the years to come?
These are all things to consider as you evaluate Pantech Global as a potential investment. We've given you the tools and insights. Now it's up to you to delve deeper, examine the evidence, and reach your own conclusions.
Remember, we've only just scratched the surface here. The prospectus and application procedures offer a wealth of information. Don't hesitate to dive into those documents, scrutinize the data, and form your own informed opinions.
We always encourage our listeners to be active participants in their investment journey. Don't just take our word for it. Challenge our assumptions, explore different perspectives, and most importantly, do your own research.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to reach out to financial advisors or other experts. If you need guidance, investing can be complex, but it's also incredibly rewarding when you approach it with knowledge and a critical eye.
Well said. We've reached the end of our deep dive into Pantech Global's chain listing. It's been a fascinating journey exploring the intricacies of this unique IPO and the dynamics of the industrial manufacturing sector.
We hope you found this exploration insightful and thought-provoking. Remember, the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing adventure. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
Until next time, happy investing.